Hello everybody, and welcome back to Aimé Césaire's Discourse on Colonialism. We are on part 3, I think of 3, but I'll let you know if we are continuing on after this one. We're going to pick up where we left off on page 65. The dossier is indeed overwhelming. A beast that by the elementary exercise of its vitality spills blood and sows death. You remember that historically it was in the form of this fierce archetype that capitalist society first revealed itself to the best minds and consciences. Since then, the animal has become anemic. It is losing its hair, its hide is no longer glossy, but the ferocity has remained, barely mixed with sadism. It is easy to blame it on Hitler, on Rosenberg, on Junger and the others, on the SS. But what about this? Quote, "Everything in this world reeks of crime. The newspaper, the wall, the countenance of man," unquote. Baudelaire said that before Hitler was born, which proves that the evil has a deeper source, and Isidore Ducasse, Comte de l'Autremont. In this connection, it is high time to dissipate the atmosphere of scandal that has been created around the Chants de Maldoror. Monstrosity, literary meteorite, delirium of a sick imagination? Come now, how convenient it is. The truth is that L'Autremont had only to look the Iron Man forged by capitalist society squarely in the eye to perceive the monster, the everyday monster, his hero. No one denies the veracity of Balzac. But wait a moment, take Vautrin. Let him be just back from the tropics. Give him the wings of the archangel and the shivers of malaria. Let him be accompanied through the streets of Paris by an escort of Uruguayan vampires and carnivorous ants, and you will have Maldoror. The setting is changed, but it is the same world, the same man, hard, inflexible, unscrupulous, fond, if ever a man was, of, quote, the flesh of other men, unquote. To digress for a moment, within my digression, I believe that the day will come when, with all the elements gathered together, all the sources analyzed, all the circumstances of the work elucidated, it will be possible to give the Chants de Maldoror a materialistic and historical interpretation which will bring to light an altogether unrecognized aspect of this frenzied epic, its implacable denunciation of a very particular form of society, as it could not escape the sharpest eyes around the year 1865. Before that, of course, we will have had to clear away the occultist and metaphysical commentaries that obscure the path, to re-establish the importance of certain neglected stanzas. For example, that strangest passage of all, the one concerning the mine of lice, in which we will consent to see nothing more or less than the denunciation of the evil power of gold and the hoarding up of money, to restore to its true place the admirable episode of the omnibus, and be willing to find in it very simply what is there, to wit, the scarcely allegorical picture of a society in which the privileged, comfortably seated, refuse to move closer together so as to make room for the new arrival. And, be it said in passing, who welcomes the child who has been callously rejected? The people, represented here by the ragpicker. Baudelaire's ragpicker. Quote, "Paying no heed to the spies of the copse, his thralls, he pours his heart out in stupendous schemes. He takes great oaths and dictates sublime laws, casts down the wicked, aids the victim's cause," unquote. Then it will be understood, will it not, that the enemy whom L'Autremont has made the enemy, the cannibalistic, brain-devouring, quote-unquote, creator, the sadist perched on a, quote, throne made of human excrement and gold, unquote, the hypocrite, the debauchee, the idler who eats the bread of others and who from time to time is found dead drunk, quote, drunk as a bedbug that has swallowed 3 barrels of blood during the night, unquote. It will be understood that it is not beyond the clouds that one must look for that creator, but that we are more likely to find him in Desfosses's business directory and on some comfortable executive board. But let that be. The moralists can do nothing about it. Whether one likes it or not, the bourgeoisie as a class is condemned to take responsibility for all the barbarism of history, the tortures of the Middle Ages and the Inquisition, warmongering and the appeal to the raison d'etat, racism, and slavery, in short, everything against which it protested in unforgettable terms at the time when, as the attacking class, it was the incarnation of human progress. The moralists can do nothing about it. There is a law of progressive dehumanization in accordance with which, henceforth, on the agenda of the bourgeoisie, there can be, nothing but violence, corruption, and barbarism. I almost forgot hatred, lying, conceit. I almost forgot Monsieur Roger Callois. Well then, M. Callois, who from time immemorial has been given the mission to teach a lax and slipshod age rigorous thought and dignified style, M. Callois, therefore, has just been moved to mighty wrath. Why? Because of the great betrayal of Western ethnography, which, with a deplorable deterioration of its sense of responsibility, has been using all its ingenuity of late to cast doubt upon the overall superiority of Western civilization over the exotic civilizations. Now at last, M. Callois takes the field. Europe has this capacity for raising up heroic saviors at the most critical moments. It is unpardonable on our part not to remember M. Massy, who around 1927 embarked on a crusade for the defense of the West. We want to make sure that a better fate is in store for M. Callois, who, in good order to defend the same sacred cause, transforms his pen into a good Toledo dagger. What did M. Massy say? He deplored the fact that, quote, the destiny of Western civilization, and indeed the destiny of man, unquote, were now threatened. That an attempt was being made on all sides, quote, to appeal to our anxieties, to challenge the claims made for our culture, to call into question the most essential part of what we possess, unquote, and he swore to make war upon these disastrous prophets. M. Callois identifies the enemy no differently. It is those European intellectuals who for the last 50 years, because of exceptionally sharp disappointment and bitterness, have relentlessly repudiated the various ideals of their culture, and who by so doing maintain, especially in Europe, a tenacious malaise. It is this malaise, this anxiety, which M. Callois, for his part, means to put to an end. And indeed, no personage since the Englishmen of the Victorian age has ever surveyed history with a conscience more serene and less clouded with doubt. His doctrine, it has the virtue of simplicity, that the West invented science, that the West alone knows how to think, that at the borders of the Western world there begins the shadowy realm of primitive thinking, which, dominated by the notion of participation, incapable of logic, is the very model of faulty thinking. At this point, one gives a start. One reminds M. Callois that the famous law of participation invented by Lévi-Breuil was repudiated by Lévi-Breuil himself, that in the evening of his life he proclaimed to the world that he had been wrong in, quote, trying to define a characteristic that was peculiar to the primitive mentality so far as logic was concerned, unquote. That on the contrary, he had become convinced that these minds do not differ from ours at all from the point of view of logic, therefore that they cannot tolerate a formal contradiction any more than we can, therefore that they reject as we do by a kind of mental reflex that which is logically impossible. A waste of time. M. Callois considers this rectification to be null and void. For M. Callois, the true Lévi-Breuil can only be the Lévi-Breuil who says that primitive man talks raving nonsense. Of course, there remain a few small facts that resist this doctrine. To wit, the invention of arithmetic and geometry by the Egyptians. To wit, the discovery of astronomy by the Assyrians. To wit, the birth of chemistry among the Arabs. To wit, the appearance of rationalism in Islam at a time when Western thought had a furiously pre-logical cast to it. But M. Callois soon puts these impertinent details in their place, since it is a strict principle that, quote, a discovery which does not fit into a whole, unquote, is precisely only a detail. That is to say, a negligible nothing. As you can imagine, once off to such a good start, M. Callois doesn't stop halfway. Having annexed science, he's going to claim ethics too. Just think of it. M. Callois has never eaten anyone. M. Callois has never dreamed of finishing off an invalid. It has never occurred to M. Callois to shorten the days of his aged parents. Well, there you have it, the superiority of the West, quote, that discipline of life which tries to ensure that the human person is sufficiently respected so that it is not considered normal to eliminate the old and infirm, unquote. The conclusion is inescapable. Compared to the cannibals, the dismemberers, and other lesser breeds, Europe and the West are the incarnation of respect for human dignity. But let us move on, and quickly, lest our thoughts wander to Algiers, Morocco, and other places where, as I write these very words, so many valiant sons of the West, in the semi-darkness of dungeons, are lavishing upon their inferior African brothers with such tireless attention those authentic marks of respect for human dignity which are called, in technical terms, electricity, the bathtub, and the bottleneck. Let us press on. Callois has not yet reached the end of his list of outstanding achievements. After scientific superiority and moral superiority comes religious superiority. Here, Callois is careful not to let himself be deceived by the empty prestige of the Orient. Asia, mother of gods, perhaps. Anyway, Europe, mistress of rites, and see how wonderful it is. On the one hand, outside of Europe, ceremonies of the voodoo type, with all their ludicrous masquerade, their collective frenzy, their wild alcoholism, their crude exploitation of a naive fervor. And on the other hand, in Europe, those authentic values which Chateaubriand was already celebrating in his Génie du Christianisme, the dogmas and mysteries of the Catholic religion, its liturgy, the symbolism of its sculptors, and the glory of the plain song. Lastly, a final cause for satisfaction. Gobineau said, quote, "The only history is white," unquote. Callois, in turn, observes, "The only ethnography is white." It is the West that studies the ethnography of the others, not the others who study the ethnography of the West. A cause for the greatest jubilation, is it not? And the museums of which Callois is so proud, not for 1 minute does it cross his mind that, all things considered, it would have been better not to have needed them, that Europe would have done better to tolerate the non-European civilizations at its side, leaving them alive, dynamic, and prosperous, whole, and not mutilated, that it would have been better to let them develop and fulfill themselves than to present for our admiration, duly labeled, their dead and scattered parts. That anyway, the museum by itself is nothing, that it means nothing, that it can say nothing, when smug self-satisfaction rots the eyes, when a secret contempt for others withers the heart, when racism, admitted or not, dries up sympathy. That it means nothing if its only purpose is to feed the delights of vanity. That, after all, the honest contemporary of St. Louis, who fought Islam but respected it, had a better chance of knowing it than do our contemporaries, even if they have a smattering of ethnographic literature, who despise it. No, in the scales of knowledge, all the museums in the world will never weigh so much as one spark of human sympathy. And what is the conclusion of all that? Let us be fair, Callois is moderate, having established the superiority of the West in all fields, and having thus re-established a wholesome and extremely valuable hierarchy. Callois gives immediate proof of this superiority by concluding that no one should be exterminated. Callois gives immediate proof of this superiority by concluding that no one should be exterminated. With him, the N-words are sure that they will not be lynched, the Jews that they will not feed new bonfires. There's just one thing. It is important for it to be clearly understood that the N-words, Jews, and Australians owe this tolerance not to their respective merits, but to the magnanimity of Callois, not the dictates of science, which can offer only ephemeral truths, but to a decree of Callois' conscience, which can only be absolute, that this tolerance has no conditions, no guarantees, unless it be Callois' sense of his duty to himself. Perhaps science will one day declare that the backward cultures and retarded peoples which constitute so many dead weights and impedimenta on humanity's path must be cleared away, but we are assured that at the critical moment the conscience of Callois, transformed on the spot from a clear conscience into a noble conscience, will arrest the executioner's arm and pronounce the Salvus Sis, to which we are indebted for the following juicy note, quote, "For me, the question of the equality of races, peoples, or cultures has meaning only if we are talking about an equality in law, not an equality in fact. In the same way, men who are blind, maimed, sick, feeble-minded, ignorant, or poor, one could hardly be nicer to the non-Occidentals, are not respectively equal in the material sense of the word to those who are strong, clear-sighted, whole, healthy, intelligent, cultured, or rich. The latter have greater capacities which, by the way, do not give them more rights, but only more duties. Similarly, whether for biological or historical reasons, there exist at present differences in level, power, and value among the various cultures. These differences entail an inequality in fact. They in no way justify an inequality of rights in favor of the so-called superior peoples, as racism would have it. Rather, they confer upon them additional tasks and an increased responsibility." Unquote. Additional tasks? What are they if not the tasks of ruling the world? Increased responsibility, what is it if not the responsibility for the world? And Callois Atlas charitably plants his feet firmly in the dust and once again raises to his sturdy shoulders the inevitable white man's burden. The reader must excuse me for having talked about M. Callois at such length. It is not that I overestimate to any degree whatever the intrinsic value of his quote-unquote philosophy. The reader will have been able to judge how seriously one should take a thinker who, while claiming to be dedicated to rigorous logic, sacrifices so willingly to prejudice and wallows so voluptuously in clichés. But his views are worth special attention because they are significant. Significant of what? Of the state of mind of thousands upon thousands of Europeans, or, to be very precise, of the state of mind of the Western petty bourgeoisie. Significant of what? Of this, that at the very time when it most often mouths the word, the West has never been further from being able to live a true humanism, a humanism made to the measure of the world. One of the values invented by the bourgeoisie in former times and launched throughout the world was man, and we have seen what has become of that. The other was the nation. It is a fact. The nation is a bourgeoisie phenomenon. Exactly, but if I turn my attention from man to nations, I note that here too there is great danger, that colonial enterprise is to the modern world what Roman imperialism was to the ancient world, the prelude to disaster and the forerunner of catastrophe. Come now, the Indians massacred, the Moslem world drained of itself, the Chinese world defiled and perverted for a good century, the N-word world disqualified, mighty voices stilled forever, homes scattered to the wind. All this wreckage, all this waste, humanity reduced to a monologue, and you think all that does not have its price? The truth is that this policy cannot but bring about the ruin of Europe itself, and that Europe, if it is not careful, will perish from the void it has created around itself. They thought they were only slaughtering Indians or Hindus or South Sea Islanders or Africans. They have, in fact, overthrown one after another the ramparts behind which European civilization could have developed freely. I know how fallacious historical parallels are, particularly the one I am about to draw. Nevertheless, permit me to quote a page from Edgar Quinet for the not inconsiderable element of truth which it contains and which is worth pondering. Here it is. Quote, "People ask why barbarism emerged all at once in ancient civilization. I believe I know the answer. It is surprising that so simple a cause is not obvious to everyone. The system of ancient civilization was composed of a certain number of nationalities, of countries which, although they seemed to be enemies or were even ignorant of each other, protected, supported, and guarded one another. When the expanding Roman Empire undertook to conquer and destroy these groups of nations, the dazzled sophists thought they saw at the end of this road humanity triumphant in Rome. They talked about the unity of the human spirit. It was only a dream. It happened that these nationalities were so many bulwarks, protecting Rome itself. Thus, when Rome in its alleged triumphal march toward a single civilization had destroyed, one after the other, Carthage, Egypt, Greece, Judea, Persia, Dacia, and Cisalpine and Transalpine Gaul, it came to pass that it had itself swallowed up the dikes that protected it against the human ocean under which it was to perish. The magnanimous Caesar, by crushing the two Gauls, only paved the way for the Teutons. So many societies, so many languages extinguished, so many cities, rights, homes annihilated, created a void around Rome, and in those places which were not invaded by the barbarians, barbarism was born spontaneously. The vanquished Gauls changed into Bagauds. Thus, the violent downfall, the progressive extirpation of individual cities, caused the crumbling of ancient civilization. That social edifice was supported by the various nationalities as by so many different columns of marble or porphyry. When, to the applause of the wise men of the time, each of these living columns had been demolished, the edifice came crashing down, and the wise men of our day are still trying to understand how such mighty ruins could have been made in a moment's time." Unquote. And now I ask, what else has bourgeoisie Europe done? It has undermined civilizations, destroyed countries, ruined nationalities, extirpated, quote, "the root of diversity," unquote. No more dikes, no more bulwarks. The hour of the barbarian is at hand. The modern barbarian, the American hour. Violence, excess, waste, mercantilism, bluff, conformism, stupidity, vulgarity, disorder. In 1913, Ambassador Page wrote to Wilson, quote, "The future of the world belongs to us. Now, what are we going to do with the leadership of the world presently when it clearly falls into our hands?" Unquote. And in 1914, quote, "What are we going to do with this England and this empire presently, when economic forces unmistakably put the leadership of the race in our hands?" Unquote. This empire and the others. And indeed, do you not see how ostentatiously these gentlemen have just unfurled the banner of anti-colonialism? "Aid to the disinherited countries," says Truman. "The time of the old colonialism has passed." That's also Truman. Which means that American high finance considers that the time has come to raid every colony in the world. So, dear friends, here you have to be careful. I know that some of you, disgusted with Europe, with all that hideous mess which you did not witness by choice, are turning, in no great numbers, toward America, and getting used to looking upon that country as a possible liberator. What a godsend, you think. The bulldozers, the massive investments of capital, the roads, the ports. But American racism! So what? European racism in the colonies has inured us to it. And there we are, ready to run the great Yankee risk. So once again, be careful. American domination, the only domination from which one never recovers. From which one never recovers unscarred. And since you are talking about factories and industries, do you not see the tremendous factory hysterically spitting out its cinders in the heart of our forests, or deep in the bush, the factory for the production of lackeys? Do you not see the prodigious mechanization, the mechanization of man, the gigantic rape of everything intimate, undamaged, undefiled, that, despoiled as we are, our human spirit has still managed to preserve? The machine, yes. Have you never seen it? The machine for crushing, for grinding, for degrading peoples. So that the danger is immense, so that unless in Africa, in the South Sea Islands, in Madagascar, that is, at the gates of South Africa, in the West Indies, that is, at the gates of America, Western Europe undertakes on its own initiative a policy of nationalities, a new policy founded on respect for people and cultures, nay, more, unless Europe galvanizes the dying cultures or raises up new ones, unless it becomes the awakener of countries and civilizations. This being said without taking into account the admirable resistance of the colonial peoples, primarily symbolized at present by Vietnam, but also by the Africa of the Rassemblement Démocratique Africain. Europe will have deprived itself of its last chance, and with its own hands drawn up over itself the pall of mortal darkness, which comes down to saying that the salvation of Europe is not a matter of a revolution in methods, it is a matter of the revolution, the one which, until such a time as there is a classless society, will substitute for the narrow tyranny of a dehumanized bourgeoisie the preponderance of the only class that still has a universal mission, because it suffers in its flesh from all the wrongs of history, from all the universal wrongs, the proletariat. Thank you for reading along with me. This brings to a close part 3, the last part of Aimé Césaire's Discourse on Colonialism. Thank you for reading along with me, and continue fighting the good fight.